Eskom is urging households to delay the recharging of their backup power supplies after power cuts have ended. This is to prevent potential trips and power supply interruptions. During power outages, inverters automatically kick in, offering a seamless transition to an uninterrupted electricity supply. However, certain models may face challenges during more severe stages of blackouts, leading to depletion and longer than usual recharging times. For some tips for consumers, energy expert Mohamed Madhi joins us now. Thank you very much, Mr. Madhi, for your time this evening. The simple reality for many South Africans is that Eskom cannot provide the only service it is supposed to provide. And in trying to deal with that, many consumers have bought expensive backup power systems like inverters, some of them recharging by solar. But I think in many instances where solar, the regulations simply don't allow for speedy installation of solar, many people are relying purely on recharging those inverter systems from the grid once load shedding has shut down. So this request from Eskom, do you think it's reasonable, given that people have invested in this solution? And some of them are fearful that the next round of load shedding is going to kick in very soon, so they want to recharge as quickly as possible.
Look, it's quite a complex question, and good evening to yourself and to the viewers. Firstly, the request by itself, from a technical point of view, is quite reasonable, that after load shedding is ended, wait a little while before you switch on those devices that need to be charged. That makes a lot of sense. It also brings, it would add to the stability of the system. However, the problem is that, most people have used or invested in these systems, and businesses in particular, so that they have a fully charged system when there is load shedding. Providing we're not in a stage 5 or stage 6 load shedding, there is enough time between load shedding intervals to charge your batteries and to charge your energy storage systems. But if the more load shedding we have in any 24-hour period, the less time there is to charge these batteries. And not everyone has these fast charging batteries. So in that case, people want to switch on as quickly as possible because they want a fully charged system for the next load shedding cycle. And I think there is a little bit of insensitivity from Eskom's point of view, perhaps, in terms of understanding just the reason and the rationale and the desperation of people of why they're using these systems, the way they're using them, why they've invested so much money to begin with, as you've said, on these systems, and businesses in particular. So, on the one hand, you have load shedding is bad enough, but then to hear that you can't use these things the way you'd like them, and you shouldn't charge them as quickly as you'd want to, is obviously very hard and not very palatable to most consumers.
Let's say most people are willing to comply. An hour after load shedding has finished, everyone who has an inverter and is in that area where load shedding has just taken place switches on their systems to start recharging. Is that simply not kicking the can down the road for an hour, where suddenly, an hour after load shedding, you do have this surge where people put their inverters on? Or is that balanced out by the fact that other appliances have already been functioning for that period and aren't simultaneously all going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So remember, when load shedding ends, the whole system comes back on, most of the system, and so you have a lot more, power that is coming into the system, and you don't want any additional power from these inverters that need charge. Well, it's the batteries actually need charging. Inverters, a misnomer that we use, in the public in general. Inverter simply translates one form of signal to another. It's actually the battery that needs charge, not the inverter. But yes, so when you wait a little bit, there's a lot more load in the system, and it can absorb, a lot of these inverters that then need charging. So it's not quite a case of kicking the can down the road. There is a definite rationale to that. But maybe I should just add one more thing, that you said in your opening statement about people have solar systems and they'd like to use those solar systems. What most people are not aware of is that if you don't have a certain kind of inverter, a hybrid, what we call a hybrid inverter, or if you don't have a generator, you actually cannot operate your solar system during load shedding. You're not allowed to. If you don't have a battery energy storage system, you actually need to switch your solar system off during load shedding because of the fear of injecting power into a grid that is deemed to be dead. It's not a live grid. So, and you can only operate your solar system if you have an inverter in the first case, a hybrid inverter, or if you have a generator. So, that's an additional consideration for people when implementing these kinds of alternative systems.
Yeah. Another consideration is that for most people, the most convenient way for this switch back and forth to happen is seamlessly, automatically, so that the system is programmed to switch over as soon as load shedding stops and the grid is back on, the charging starts happening naturally. So not only are you asking people to delay the use of an expensive system they have invested in, you are also asking them to undergo the inconvenience of constant manual switchover. Do you think anybody is really likely to give Eskom the time of day when we have suffered under load shedding for such a long time?
Look, it's very unlikely that people would. There's always the, feeling amongst any one individual user that my system wouldn't make such a big difference. And if you multiply that by everybody who feels that way, people are going to switch on their systems. They are absolutely not going to listen to any guidance from Eskom until there's some pain that is felt. Now, there is another solution to this, and that is a much smarter load shedding schedule and rotation of load shedding from Eskom, where you switch on certain areas, and this is in part in play anyway at the moment, because not everyone gets load shedding at the same time. So there is a little bit of misleading, information from Eskom saying that when load shedding ends, all these inverters come online, these batteries come online. It's not a case of the whole country suddenly coming online when load shedding ends. Load shedding happens in stages in different parts of the country, and that should stabilize the system. And if you do that more smartly, if you do that a little bit, taking into account where you normally would find these inverters, and it's fairly well known, then there are ways to mitigate it from Eskom itself. So it's a little bit of a lazy attitude from Eskom to just tell consumers, don't switch on half an hour after load shedding.
Eskom is saying that if this is not adhered to, if there is this sudden extra drain on the system, it could result in higher stages of load shedding, up to 1 or 2 stages. So essentially, they're saying if we're on stage 4 and you don't give us that grace period of an hour before recharging your battery systems, well, then it's likely you'll be feeling the pain of stage 6. Do those numbers add up?
I think on the face of it, it does not add up because that would be 1.4 gigawatts. Now let's put that into perspective. 1.4 gigawatts, which Eskom claims, of power coming on from battery storage systems is about 3/4 the size of Coburg, both operating units at Coburg. So that's, 3/4 the size of a nuclear power plant. Very, very unlikely that all that happens in one go. But the best way to come to this is, Eskom needs to share some figures, and they need to show us that this is actually what happens, need to share some charts, need to share the graphs and the data, as opposed to these bland statements. Then we have a much better idea of what's going on, and people can relate to that. They see the data, they understand what's going on, they could act on that.
Thank you so much. And I don't think any South African presented with clear information facing more serious load shedding would not be willing to come to the party to some degree. So thank you very much for your insights, though, and for explaining that. That was energy expert Mohamed Madhi telling us about Eskom urging households to delay the recharging of their backup power systems.